Okay, so hello and welcome to today's session where we're going to be talking about the hardware asset lifecycle management and the different stages that hardware assets go through during their journey within an organization. So this is all looking right before you even start going through the procurement and requesting it, all the way through to the end when you're looking to ITAD it, retire it, or dispose of it. So first of all, let's quickly just remind ourselves what is a hardware asset and what is hardware asset management. So hardware asset management are the people, processes and technologies required to manage the defined IT hardware assets in scope throughout their life cycle. The key word there being defined. So what may be a hardware asset for one company may not be a hardware asset for another company. It's all dependent on what you as the organization and you as the ITAM function have decided classifies as an IT asset within the organization. So HAM starts from the planning phase to ensure that hardware assets are correctly managed throughout their life cycle, right the way through, like we said, to that retirement and the IT asset disposition or disposal if it can't be resold. So we're going to look at all of the different stages of the hardware asset life cycle, what it means for ITAM, what it means for software implications, what it means for your asset management database, key things that you need to be considering for these specific lifecycle stages. So let's start and dig right in and look at what the asset lifecycle looks like. First of all, we've got a lovely wheel here. Feel free to take a screen grab if you think it's useful. So first of all, we have got the request. So this is when a user, a stakeholder, or maybe even the ITAM team have identified a need for an asset. This may be because it's reached end of life. This may be because it's a new starter. This may be because it's a mover. It could be for whatever reason. You've identified that there is a need for an asset. So when you go through the request part of the life cycle, you're looking at making sure that all of the requests are managed correctly with the right and required amount of data so that you can make an informed justification as to whether that is actually needed or not. Because if it's not needed, you don't need to fulfill the request. If you don't have business justification, you're not going to be able to do anything without any business justification. And making sure you've got all of the required approvals as well. Approvals is really important. So it depends on the structure of your ITAM function, who owns hardware budgeting, software budgeting, etc. But you may need several layers of approvals here, including the approval from the user's line manager. It may also be a budget holder, a cost center information, a department head, ITAM, and even for new asset types, even security and architecture. So there's a lot of approvals depending on what kind of asset is actually being requested. The request process should be really easy and simple for your end users and really easy and simple for ITAM. It should be the same every time. You should be looking at the same data sets. It should be a nice, smooth, almost Amazon style shopping experience for the end user with a nice form to fill out, really easy, shows them exactly what hardware models have been approved, what the spec is, what the cost is, what kind of user profiles need certain hardware equipment, etc. So yeah, make it as easy and as streamlined and as simple as possible. Once you've gone through the request process, you can either go through the procurement stage or the deployment stage. It all depends on what your existing stock levels look like. So if you don't have any stock, then you need to go to the procurement phase. If you do have existing stock, you can go straight to the deployment phase. Of course, as long as you have all of that justification that we mentioned previously and all of the approvals. So when you go to the procurement stage, now you're looking to make sure that you're purchasing the right hardware assets, the right specs, the right models, the right vendors, the right resellers, the right costs, the right warranty, extended warranty, etc., etc. So you'll need to make sure that you're following all of your approved hardware convention and your approved resellers. You're only approving when you've received that full justification and sign off from whoever's going to pay for it. No sign off, no justification, no ordering. It's really important as well at this stage to be tracking that procurement information when you get it. So when you do place the order, that you're tracking how much you spent on it, the PO reference, the PO date, the order date, warranty information, etc. Because you'll need this to populate your asset management database. And we'll talk about that in a later slide. So once if either we've gone through procurement or we found stuff in stock, we then move to deployment. This is making sure that the asset is fit for purpose to deploy out into the end user, out into the wild. This makes sure that all of the drivers, all of the software, access, etc. is set up. Asset tags have been correctly created and assigned on the right spot on the device. And also that you've updated the AMDB to reflect who the new owner is of the asset, along with all of the procurement information if it has been procured, or changing the state and substate if it was already in stock and available. We then move into the BAU, the business, general day-to-day use, the meat of the asset's life cycle, really. This is just when it's out there doing its job, hopefully working brilliantly for you. So this is just day-to-day BAU consumption. Hopefully nothing's going wrong. Hopefully the user's happy with it, you're happy with it, you're seeing it in your inventory tools, etc. We move on to a stage where maybe it's not going quite so well, and that is break fix. And that may naturally occur when you're going through the BAU in use state. So break fix is when you're looking at something that needs to be fixed and repaired or even replaced. So there's a couple of things to think about here, and we'll mention those later on when we dig into each of these life cycle stages. But here we're talking about internal repairs versus external repairs. So what's covered under warranty, what isn't covered under warranty, what can you fix internally without breaching the warranty, and what do you unfortunately need to send off to the vendor to get fixed? And how are you going to then ensure that user's still working? Are you providing a loaner? Are you providing an asset that they can use a brand new one forever, and then you're going to put that break fix one back into your stock? What's the plan? You need to have a process there. We move on to one of my favorite life cycle stages, and that's the reclaim and reuse. So very much like you do on the software side of things, where you're looking to make sure that people are utilizing the software license that they've been provided, we're doing the same on hardware in this stage. We're making sure that if an asset's not being used, that we're reclaiming it, putting it back into stock so that we can reuse it to meet that request part of it, or the deployment stage of the life cycle. We're also looking at stock management here, making sure that everything is nicely aligned, that everyone knows that, this device is for ITAD, this one needs to be re-imaged, this one needs to be cleaned up, and these ones by the door to go out are ready to be sent back out into the wild and back into the in-use part of the life cycle. This is all about optimization at this stage. You wouldn't believe the amount of money that you can save by adopting that internal audit process you do for software on hardware. You can really reclaim a lot of stuff. People keep stuff, put it in a drawer. I don't need to give it back to IT. Yes, you do. And then you can uncover all sorts of gold that you didn't know you had, build up your stock levels, meet requests, and yeah, it's brilliant. I highly recommend it. And you can use your inventory tools to see when stuff was last discovered and last online as well. So the next stage, we're reaching the end of our assets life cycle already. I know it's only been a few minutes, but we're nearing the end, and that's decommissioning and retirement. The decommissioning side of things really does relate more to infrastructure assets. So, you wouldn't necessarily need to fully decom a laptop or a mobile or a tablet. It may just be, resetting it back to factory, removing user profiles, removing Apple IDs, Google IDs, whatever it may be. Whereas in the infrastructure space, there's a whole powering down, there's a whole making sure you're removing all of the software from the device, there's unracking, dewiring, physically moving, etc., etc. So this is focusing on that. So making sure that we're retiring the asset from service, making sure we're getting all the software back, and any of the additional components that we may have added to that physical device, like an increased amount of memory, for example, or a bigger SSD or hard disk that we can then utilize and reuse somewhere else. It's also then about making sure the AMDB is updated to reflect these changes, and you'll commonly find that this stage is a big part of your hardware refreshing. And we do actually have a full webinar on hardware refreshing coming in a couple of months. So that is a good one. That's really good. I do enjoy hardware refreshing. Ideally, we're going to move to ITAD next. This is when there's still some value left in the asset, or you hope that there's some value left in the asset. This is when you start looking at your data destruction. So your Blanco references, other tools are available, but Blanco seems to be the go-to one to make sure that you are fully digitally destroying any hangover, any footprint, any legacy information that's on that hard drive. If you can't do that using a tool, you have to crush the device, unfortunately. We're also looking then at the disposal. Anything that doesn't have any value left, it's not worth the hassle. It needs to be recycled and disposed. Donation as well. You could look at getting that warm fuzzy feeling and donating some of your old assets to local charities or local schools, etc. We'll dig into more on that in a later slide, but there's a lot of things to consider with that one. But of course, my favorite is resale. Organizations that turn around and say that it's too much hassle to implement ITAD. They have someone that comes and picks it up for free, and they just take the equipment, and whatever they do with it, they do with it. It's out of our stock room. We're not paying for them to come and do this. They're just taking the equipment. A lot of clients where we try and change that mindset and we do implement ITAD end up making hundreds of thousands of pounds, dollars, or euros in profit through ITAD. And at the moment, every little helps. So yeah, reselling as much of the asset as you can is an absolute must, with the fact that budgets are just diminishing and declining every year since the pandemic. So yeah, resale is definitely one of my favorite ones. It makes ITAM look awesome. And you can also bring that money back into ITAM if you want for an additional module, for extra hardware, extra software licenses, or you may never see it again and it just goes back into the overall centralized budgets. But that's the core asset lifecycle. Each of these stages have their own sub-processes and processes, which we'll go on to in a second. So first of all, let's look and dig deeper into the request part of the process. As we mentioned, we are looking for valid justification and a reason for why they need the new asset, regardless of the asset type. Remember, this is the defined assets that we have highlighted and said counts as a hardware asset within the organization. So if it's not a hardware asset, unfortunately, I'm not interested at this point. It's only the defined hardware asset. So do you have a reason, valid justification for this? Next step, do you have the line manager or your team's approval? This is really important because if a line manager doesn't approve it, why would ITAM? If the line manager doesn't think you need a new asset, well, we're certainly not, are we? Because your line manager doesn't think you need one. So a lot of requests, when they're automatically built into a service management tool, if the line manager rejects the request, it doesn't even come to us. That's it. Done. Process over. No, we don't have budget, or no, I don't think you need a new laptop or an upgraded phone or whatever. Once it's been approved by the line manager, the team, whoever you've set it up as, the next bit is we're looking at financial approval. Again, if this is rejected by the cost center owner, it doesn't reach ITAM. We only want to see requests that come through that have been approved by the line manager and there is budget for it. So if there's none of those approvals, we don't even see it. But yeah, if the cost center owner approves it, then it comes to us in ITAM. We have a look at the justification. We double, triple check that there is budget for it if it's a decentralized budget mechanism, and then we can go through and approve it. We, as ITAM professionals, may have a bit more knowledge, a bit more of a say than the team or line manager. You have to remember the business need for it and the business case. If the business have said that they need it, then fine. But at the same time, there's no harm in you going through and triple checking the justification, triple checking that what they're requesting is actually going to meet what they need. So for example, if someone requests an iPhone Pro Max, do they really need that? You look at the justification, not really. A normal standard iPhone in our hardware convention would meet the requirements. That's where we come in to provide that extra, not barrier, but that extra validation that the asset being requested is definitely needed. And then of course, as we mentioned, we're checking our stock before we go into do either procurement or deployment. If we've got stock, amazing, brilliant, because you've done the reclaim and reuse process and reclaimed a lot of assets back, then we can use the stuff that we've got in stock and put it out there. And as we mentioned, unfortunately, if there's no stock, we move to procurement. So we're looking at procurement now, and on this stage of the life cycle, we're making sure that we're only going through our approved resellers or hardware vendors. So this is either the middleman, the managed service provider, or the VAR, the value-added reseller, or we're going transacting directly with our hardware vendors to get our equipment. At this point as well, we also make sure that the correct specification, the correct model and asset is procured. Make sure that it's following our standard hardware convention, 16 gig of RAM, 512 SSD because we're cloud first, that kind of thing. Making sure it's the right screen size, right model, SKU, all of that jazz. Simple, basic stuff, but the amount of times it doesn't happen will probably not surprise you. But then also, if you're a decentralized procurement function, you need to make sure that you're getting that cost center information so that you can recharge back. If you're a centralized hardware budget, then this doesn't really matter because you're consuming that and absorbing that centrally through IT, technology, ITAM, whoever holds the overall hardware budget. And if you don't recharge it out, this bit's not right for you. But yeah, if you are recharging out, make sure you've got that information so you can do that cross-charging. Capturing that procurement information for your IT asset register and your AMDB, this is really important. Procurement data triggers so many things like the depreciation effective date, the depreciation amount. You can say that it's a straight line 3-year or 5-year depreciation, but if you have no start date in there, it doesn't know what it's depreciating. You can get that from the procurement information, and then if it's legacy stuff, there's loads of warranty portals and stuff like that where you can find this information. But get it in early. Get into the habit of adding in your PO information, order date, purchase date, cost, who you've purchased it from, order received date, etc. Get in the habit of putting that in early doors, because you'll thank yourself when you're coming to do the hardware refreshing or trying to understand how much value is left in an asset. And then finally, it's a sub-process. We mentioned we'd have formal, proper processes, but we'll also have sub-processes with these life cycle stages. And a sub-process is one called the hardware goods received process. Now, for that, we're checking that what we've ordered matches what has been delivered. Again, it seems like common sense, but there are times where hardware vendors or resellers miss an asset or send out, you've ordered 10 and they send out 9 of the correct model and 1 of the incorrect model. Or they send out 9 with the right amount of RAM memory and 1 without the right RAM or memory. Just making sure you're doing that validation, making sure that what you have ordered is what is you have received, and also making sure they're not dead on arrival, DOA. It happens infrequently nowadays as laptops have got way more reliable and way more sturdy in transportation, but sometimes it can happen through no one's fault. But you go to boot it up and it's dead on arrival, it doesn't work, it doesn't boot, you can't image it, you can't do anything with it. So yeah, you need to make sure you're validating that all of these are okay, that they're correct, that you can image them, put them into your stock or deploying them. If not, hardware vendors will just switch these out. Admittedly, it causes a bit of a time delay for you in being able to meet certain requests, but you'd rather switch it out and get one that works rather than give a user one that's dead on arrival. So yeah, make sure that you're doing your hardware goods received process when you're going through this stage. Next, we're looking at the deployment. So this is making sure that you have the correct build, the correct image is applied for your end user technology devices. Typically, this normally just relates to your laptops and your desktops, but there are some organizations as well that have a image for a MacBook, for example, or an iPhone or an iPad as well. You often hear of, I've been to my local secondhand store, I've brought an iPad and it's got your company logo all over it and your company login and stuff like that. So organizations do that for your handhelds as well, and MacBooks as well. They can have standard images, or they can have settings in there where you can't do certain things with it, and that's all part of the deployment stage of setting that up. If your hardware vendor or your value-added reseller or your managed service provider haven't done the asset tagging bit, if you're not paying for them to do that, you need to make sure that the asset is tagged following your asset tagging naming convention and your naming convention for the overall asset itself as well. Making sure that those data center, static assets, servers, etc. Are racked and powered on correctly is another really important phase. This we give to the infrastructure team. ITAM, I don't expect you to go in and cable up in the data center, but they need to make sure they're doing it correctly. Once we've done all of that for all of our asset types, we need to make sure we're updating AMDB for the correct owner, location, state of the asset, and make sure that all the information that should be there is there. That's really important. You should really be looking at doing those AMDB updates in as real time as you can. Don't leave it. Don't sit on it for a week because you'll forget. And that number of assets you need to update will keep increasing, and you're suddenly in a backlog, and suddenly AMDB isn't accurate and you miss this one. You forgot that one. Just do it in real time. Don't save it for later. Just get it done. And then with the physical EUT assets, depending on how your setup is, you can arrange for that physical delivery to the end user, or the end user to come to your service desk or your tech support desk, or your centralized hub where you physically give out the asset, sign like the waiver form that the end user does to accept that they're taking the asset, that they accept they're following the acceptable use policy, and all of that good stuff. So yeah, that's the final part of the deployment phase, when you physically give the device to the end user. Now we move to the in-use phase, and we still do have a bit of work in here from ITAM. It's not just we leave it and get it out there, but we need to make sure that the asset is being used per the hardware asset management ITAM policy and the acceptable use policy. We are very much focusing on ITAM, not ham and SAM. But in this case, there will be a specific policy for your hardware and how to use it. Need to make sure they're using it. If they're not, we're going to be tracking any breaches of our policies and reporting that up where it needs to go, to be honest with you. So whether that's to their line manager, the user themselves, HR, security, whoever, we need to be tracking those breaches of acceptable use policy. If a colleague is traveling on public transport and they have a lovely MacBook and they put a coffee cup on it, that kind of thing needs to be tracked, needs to be talked about, because all that needs to happen is a judder, coffee over MacBook, $2,000 MacBook, no longer worthwhile. Silly little things like that can be avoided but are in your acceptable use policy and need to be managed and tracked as part of the in-use phase of the asset's life cycle. Ensuring the assets are being used effectively, we'll go into that in a bit more detail when we look at the reclaim and reuse. Making sure the asset is reporting online and being inventoried. The amount of times we go into clients and they think that their AMDB is really good and everything that's online is reporting in. Then you look at an SCCM, or you look at an Intune, or you look at a Jamf, or you look at Active Directory, or you look at ServiceNow Discovery, and you go, well, you've got 300 devices here that are online that I can't find in the AMDB. Why is that? And then suddenly, the reporting's not working, the agent's not set up correctly. There's just all sorts of excuses come out. But you need to be doing this on a regular basis, comparing your inventory tools, your discovery tools with your asset management database to validate that everything that is online is in your AMDB and that all of the lifecycle data in the AMDB is populated correctly. It's an open goal. It's a really easy one to do. Just export your AMDB, export your inventory tools, VLOOKUP, is this serial number in here? If not, why? Fix it, get it reporting into the AMDB. And this is also a really good way of looking at your in-use AMDB assets and looking at service and looking at SCCM and your inventory tools and going, well, this is listed as in use, but it's not been online for 4 months. Maybe we can move to our reclaim and reuse phase of the life cycle and get that asset back. And then, finally, in the in-use, we're tracking customer ownership, making sure that the person that you gave it to still has it. Again, you can do this looking at your inventory tools. What is the inventory tool seen as the last logged on user? Why is that different to your assigned to? It shouldn't be. It should be the same. Then you can trigger that process, contact the users, understand what's happened, remind them that if they're giving it to someone else, it needs to come back in to IT first for re-imaging, etc., etc., etc. So break fix, probably my least favorite part of the life cycle. I'm not going to lie to you, but we're talking about internal and external repairs. Let's just dig into that a bit more, because the internal repairs bit can cause some problems and some trouble. You have to remember things that are in warranty. If you try and fix it yourself internally, you may do things that breach said warranty. There are some things that are covered under warranty that are not covered under warranty. So making sure that you're clued up on what is and is not covered under your warranty will really help your decision making when it comes to the break fix. If you are looking at doing internal repairs for assets that are out of warranty, make sure you've got a waiver in place and the skill set internally to be able to do this. There have been some horror cases in the past where someone has internally repaired a device. Unfortunately, during the repairs, they've come to harm, or when they've given it out to an end user, they've come to harm because they haven't had the skills to fix what they thought they would be able to fix. So just make sure you've got internal waivers, that there's training provided if you're going to be doing internal repairs. Things like a simple battery swap, really easy to do. That's fine. Changing RAM, a hard disk, etc. Things like that, it's still good to have that waiver in place. And obviously make sure that you know what's covered under warranty and what isn't covered under warranty. With internal repairs as well, one of the main things at the moment with end user organizations trying to extend the life of their assets is the battery. For things like laptops, Lenovo's, Dell's, HP's, they can be changed, and there are OEM batteries that you can buy. And if it's out of warranty, normally the service desk guys can easily change a battery to prolong the life of that asset. But if it's a bit more complicated, like a keyboard or a screen, those things are a nightmare to change. And I don't know if you feel the same, but laptops now are getting more and more compressed and harder to take components out. MacBooks, for example, are so tricky to change or fix anything in there that unfortunately you're either forced to buying a new one or paying a third party for the repairs. So like I said, you can replace the basic broken components of the asset internally as long as you've got that waiver and the skill set in place. Or you're looking then at the full asset replacement due to it being irreparable. That's either outside of warranty stuff, and typically if it's out of warranty, you're probably near the end of its lifespan anyway, unless you've brought extended support and coverage, etc. And it's the same on the warranty side of things. If the device is in warranty but can't be fixed, then a hardware vendor will typically send you a new one, or they will fix the broken components that are covered under the warranty for you. If it's not covered under the warranty, they'll tell you, and unfortunately you need to find a third party or alternative solution for you. There are, of course, options available out there that relates to extending the warranty, expanding the warranty, additional support, etc. with your hardware vendor or the reseller. You've got things like Apple Care, you've got Premier support, you've got premium support, you've got extended support, you've got platinum support, all these different kind of layers of offerings that they can provide you. And some of these will literally ask no questions. You just tell them it's broken, they'll send you out a new one, or they'll send someone on site to fix it for you within X amount of hours, and some really cool things. But they do cost a lot of money. In fact, when we've been speccing this up for some clients, it's been millions over 3 years, and it's millions that they currently don't have. So it's sticking it under the standard warranty and hoping that things can be fixed. The cost of fixing however many assets break over that 3 years is less than what it would have been to buy the extended support or the premier support, the premium support, the gold support, the platinum support, etc. But that's a call you make if you're flush with money and you're interested in that kind of thing. Have a look at things like Apple Care, Premier support, premium support, platinum support, gold support. And if any of them work for you, great, go for it. Just make sure that you're tracking that contract in the AMDB so that you know what is covered, what isn't covered, how long for, etc. Reclaim and reuse, my most favorite part. So back in the day, we always used to do this for software. I mean, we still do, but it was a big thing in the software asset management space. Now we're doing ITAMs. We're looking at hardware and software. Should not be differentiating between the two. And we can adopt the internal process with physical hardware devices now. So if an asset isn't being used for 30 plus days, get it back, just very much like you would on software. If it's not being used effectively, like with software, get it back, put it back into your stock. If it's not required, no line manager, team owner, whatever, you cannot keep it and put it in your drawer for the next person. We'll have it back, we'll put it into our stock. If it's an unapproved asset, not from a hardware convention that they've gone rogue and purchased from their local Apple store or their local technology store, get it back. It's not an approved hardware model, we'll take that back. And if you've got additional requests for those assets, you can then reuse these ones. The ones that you've proactively gone out and reclaimed, put them into stock, clean them up, use the word pre-loved rather than secondhand, and get them out there, get them used. You can then also look at using this for your hardware refreshes. If you then have someone whose asset is long overdue a refresh, you've just reclaimed one that's got 2 years left, retire the old one, give them one that's got 2 years left. That could turn into 3 years with no problems, and you haven't spent a penny. It all makes sense. So you can add all of these stock that you're requiring back in, and like we said, you can then use this stock for your hardware refresh process, or you can keep it there for your request process. I would also recommend that you keep a record of all of the devices that you're reclaiming through this process as part of your monthly ITAM reporting, your quarterly, your yearly ITAM reporting, etc. And use the remaining depreciated value if you are being asked to track any cost avoidances. You can't claim the full RRP or the value that you purchased it from unless it is brand new or a day old or whatever, and for some reason you've given it out, then an audit's happened and you've reclaimed it back, but that doesn't seem like that would ever happen. So only reclaim the remaining value of the asset if you're asked to claim hardware savings, for example, or cost avoidances. Yeah, it might only be like $20 because it's an older asset. It might be $100. It doesn't matter, but you can show, the value of the asset that you've recovered, but against the quantity. And it may actually be that the quantity side of things is better than the remaining value of the asset. You may also be able to recoup stuff that goes straight to ITAD and you make money off of. So it's important to track all of that stuff that you're reclaiming, very much like you would with software. Put it all into your ITAM savings tracker, and then you can report on that monthly, quarterly, yearly, however you want to do it. So now we move on to the retirement and the ITAD, the final part of the journey with our asset. So we need to do the formal retirement, and this includes from the asset management database and the configuration management database. This is basically changing the state from whatever it was to retired, disposed, retired, sold, retired, donated, etc. If you've got an asset that is actually pending disposal but is still on site with you, it needs to go to in stock pending disposal. Do not retire it until you have formally received the notification to say that it's been disposed of, your disposal certificate, your data destruction references, etc. It should still be in stock, and then you only put it as to retired when you've received those. I would suggest also, if you do have a third-party ITAD company, that you create a stock room for them in your asset management database so that you can remove it from your stock rooms and put it into their stock room within your AMDB so that it doesn't mess with your reporting mechanisms. So once you've done that, we're also looking at retiring assets through our hardware refreshing. So that's when we're proactively going out, looking at assets that have reached the end of their life, proactively calling the user in, getting the asset back, and then sending that off for ITAD. We're looking at, as we mentioned before, the decommissioning side of things. This is way more related to the infrastructure assets and data center and stuff like that rather than end user bits. But, you may have a little process where you're decommissioning, laptops, desktops, mobiles and tablets simply by resetting it back to factory or wiping the user profile off it, etc. Really important then is that we're getting the data destruction references. Again, we said Blanco, but there's loads of tools out there that do it digitally for you and can confirm that there is literally nothing to do with your organization on that at all. If they can't do that, unfortunately, it needs to be crushed. There is no other option. The hard drive needs to be shredded so that there's no security breaches. There's no way that your data can get out there. You can then look at the physical destruction of the actual device itself. If there's no residual value in it, and by destruction, I mean like you can use the ITAD company to recycle it, follow the WE directive or your local environmental and electronic waste laws. You can donate it. You need a waiver if you're doing donations to schools or charities. Again, just to say that this is no longer our asset. We have no legal obligation to support you, help you out. If it goes wrong, it's over to you. But the ultimate goal would be resale. This is when you can get some money back for the components, the physical whole asset itself. Get some money back for that asset at its end of life. Sure, you may only get ones where you only get $10, $25 and think, is it worth it? But when it adds up over the year, yes, it would be worth it, especially if you're proactively going after that hardware refreshing plan. Just quickly, actually, on the donations as well, a lot of organizations like to donate the assets without the hard drive. So that might be something to think about as well, whether you're going to just donate the shell of the asset and the charity or school needs to add in the hard drive themselves, or they do have Blanco internally. So they're not sending it off to the ITAD company, they are Blancoing it internally, and all the ones that are successful on that, then they give them the hard drive as well. But yeah, something to consider on that one. All of these life cycle stages are aligned to an ITAM process and sub-process on the HAM side of the ITAM life. So make sure that you've got all of your core main processes in place and then all the sub-processes are assigned to that. So you may actually have a hardware request process, and a sub-process of the hardware request might be hardware approvals process. In your procurement, you may have the main procurement process, but then under that you've got the financial approval, you've got your hardware goods received, etc., etc. So all of the life cycle have main processes and sub-processes. All of those processes support the hardware life cycle. They are there to support each element of that HAM life cycle. And if they don't, revisit, rewrite, and re-educate. Processes should be a living document. It shouldn't be something that just sits there. You can't touch it for a long time because you've got to go through this process or that process. If it's not working, update it, speak to stakeholders, speak to end users, re-educate them, make it fit for purpose, make it so that it does work for your organization, because there's no point in having a process. It would just be pixels on a screen if it's not being followed. Facts. So make sure that if it's not working, you revisit it, you even do the process yourself and understand the pain points of your stakeholders and your end users. If it's not working, update it and then get that out there again. Your AMDB is critical when it comes to ITAM and hardware asset management, and each stage of the asset lifecycle requires AMDB updates. Includes but is not limited to your state and substate changes as it goes through its different phases of the life cycle, Procurement information, we've said that a lot. I really hope I've hammered that home to you to put the procurement information in there. Your life cycle dates, this is your warranty dates and your defined scheduled retirement dates. So your warranty may be 3 years, but you're running a 4-year lifespan. So the scheduled retirement date would be 1 year after your warranty date. Really important that you put this information in there. Who the assigned user is, the location, the asset tag information, your disposal, destruction and resale data as well. That's really important at the end of life. Make sure you're putting how much money you got for that asset, who the beneficiary was, aka who the ITAD partner was, your data destruction references, your disposal certificates. Stick it all in the AIMDb. And I also like to put these in a separate SharePoint folder as well, in case anything ever happened to one source. You still have all of those certificates from an audit perspective. Something else to mention that I like using as well when it comes to break fix. If you're not using CIs, or you're not matured in the ITIL processes with problem change, incident request, etc., and you're not attaching the incidents to the asset. I mean, if you are, brilliant, because then you can see every call that's ever been made about that asset, what the problem was, what the fix was, what the resolution was, etc. If you're not doing that, use the comments or the work notes or similar on the asset so that you can comment what has happened to that device, whether it might be someone spilt tea over it, whether it might be a cracked screen, bad battery, whether you've increased the memory, anything like that. If you don't have it linked directly into your asset, make comments and work notes in the AIMDb so you've got that record of what changed and why. And because we are thinking about ITAM, not just SAM and HAM, we're looking at the software implications. And there are a lot of software implications as you go around the wheel of a HAM lifecycle. First of all, when we're doing requests, we're looking at, do we have enough licenses? When we're doing procurement, do we have existing agreements? What applications and licenses do we need? Who's the vendor? Who's paying for it? When we get to deployment, we need to understand, is it locally deployed? Is it SaaS? Is it cloud hosted? When it's in use, is the software actually being used? Can we reclaim it through an internal audit? What licenses do we need to count for renewals? When it's break fix, and this is something people keep forgetting, what licenses do we need to get off the broken device? Because we're giving out a loaner device or a completely brand new device. A lot of things nowadays, because they're like, you can use it on X amount of devices per user account, less of an issue. But for the old device-based licenses, you need to get it back. Those that have a serial number or a license key, because otherwise users not going to be able to use it on their replacement device. People always seem to forget this, and then they ship the device off and realize there's a specific niche bit of software that they haven't reclaimed the license key for or deactivated the license, and then the user can't use it on their new device. Really important one to remember. Reclaim and reuse. So when assets go back to their standard image or you've reclaimed it, what licenses have you got back? Track it. Keep a record of it. When you go to retire it and decommission it and send it off at ITAD, again, what have you reclaimed from that asset? Do you need to reclaim anything because you've done the hardware refresh process to then put it on the new device, very much like the break fix? Or is it just an asset that you've recovered that's going straight off for ITAD because it's been sat in a drawer? Or was he used as a secondary device? What licenses do you need to reclaim? What licenses have you reclaimed? And what impact does that have on your compliance, on your renewals, on the financial side of things with software? Anything that you can claim in your ITAM savings tracker, please do when it comes to any of these stages when you're looking at the hardware lifecycle and the software implications. So in conclusion then, hardware asset management tracks all elements of the hardware assets lifecycle. You need to make sure that you've got all of those processes, controls and KPIs to manage and show the effectiveness of HAM. If IT assets of any type are not in use but in scope, reclaim them, get them back into stock. You can use them for hardware refreshing, or you can use them to meet requests. Ensure your life cycles are clearly defined internally. Publish it, put it out there. Don't just hide it away. Put it on the intranet page, do email comms, do internal webinars, deep dives, one-on-ones, whatever it needs. Just get that message out there on what the life cycle of an asset looks like for you within your organization. Also, make sure that people know how critical AIMDb updates are. This should be your central golden source of truth. Needs to be updated. Like I said before, don't just leave it until, this week I'm going to do it and you're way behind. Do the updates as real time as you physically can. Align your life cycle stages with your ITAM processes, which we just mentioned. And of course, never forget about the software implications. Something people do when they're siloed into SAM and HAM. We are ITAM. We look at hardware and software and cloud. We care about it all, and also FinOps, which is a new thing that's coming in is just awesome. So next up, we're going to be looking at our end of life and ITAD webinar. So that's going to be looking at one of the most important stages of the life cycle of an asset. We're also going to be looking at hardware asset management technologies, building your hardware refresh plan, ham and green IT, and hardware asset management maturity explained. So yeah, really hope you found it useful.